Make sure it's recording this time.
Okay, it says it's recording now. We're good.
We are good. Well, thank you. Um, and I'm just going to move right in so we can move along. But
Sure.
I'm speaking today with Brian Prather, an Army veteran who spent about 10 years as an air defense missile operator and a contingency contracting officer. And he recently left Facebook to accept a position as an internal recruiter with Nike. And Brian is among 14 nominees for the inaugural Veteran Champion of the Year in corporate America. And we're going to talk today a little bit about his own rise in corporate America and how the military prepared him and has helped him along in that. When you left the Army in 2013, what was your transition process like, and what made you seek out a role as a recruiter?
Sure. So for me, I think I faced the big question that a lot of veterans face, and it's just, what's next? What is that new skill set that I have to create? Because a lot of us did things in the military that don't necessarily translate to what we want to do in the civilian world. I was lucky enough to where I had a friend that was in recruiting that kind of gave me the rundown on what it was he did. And it sounded like something I could do and kind of flex on some of the strengths and skills that I gained in the military. And so I did that. He kind of, got me a role into a small recruiting company, and I slowly worked my way up and enjoyed the aspects of business development and working with candidates. And eventually when I got to full life cycle recruiting and then internal recruiting, I really got to see kind of the full spectrum of the work that I did of really changing people's lives. Is, you're finding people that are either out of work.
Brian, has the video frozen on your end, or is that just on my end?
Oh, did I get you?
You're back now. I'm
Sorry.
not, it just froze on my end, so I wasn't sure what was happening. And you were just talking about the enjoyment of kind of finding these people who might be out of work or otherwise, looking for a new start and being able to place them in something better and a good fit for them.
Yeah.
And when did you kind of realize you wanted to try to help veterans in this way too, to make a transition? How did that come about for you?
Sure. I mean, I really leaned into that area when I got into recruiting over at Facebook. And I was a leader in the military for almost 7 of my 10 years that I served in the Army. And one of the things that we always talk about to our soldiers is that we lead by example. And that's something, there are certain things that you learn and develop in your career in the military that I think you always take with you, and you want to continue to do those things when you get out in the civilian world. So when I got to Facebook, I noticed that they had a lot of great programs and initiatives and events that they did to connect veterans with Facebook and figure out, whether it was engineering or design or operations. So I wanted to lean in and volunteer there. And so I slowly kind of, started helping out a little more and more with different events, to eventually I was managing my own programs and guest panel speakers and teaching master classes on how to identify vets, how to read their resumes, how to educate our business partners on, why it's important to hire veterans and some of the skills that they bring, that come with these non-traditional profiles. And then also helping our veterans understand, this is what you have to do to get a job at these big tech companies. And this is how you need to write your resume. And these are the types of questions that you're going to get asked. And, these are the skill sets that you need to develop, and just kind of teach them your foot in their door? And then how do you talk about yourself, and how do you portray your military experience with this job in the civilian world that you may not match on paper, but there are certain skill sets that are going to benefit that company. So things like that.
And what do veterans bring that maybe their civilian counterparts don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's skill sets that anybody can have, and most people do. But there's certainly traits and characteristics for vets that I see. Things like resilience, adaptability, resourcefulness. In the military, a lot of times we can work in very stressful, chaotic environments. You get faced with adversity constantly, so that becomes an area that you can thrive in. It becomes second nature to not just be reactive, but be proactive at the same time. So you see, vets tend to have a great track record when they do come to the civilian world, because they have all these intangible skills that they bring that help them excel among their peers.
Well, obviously, a lot of vets, as you say, may not have had a real techie type of job in the military, or one that they see would automatically translate to a Facebook or a Nike or another company that is poised kind of on the cutting edge of corporate America. What can they do to make themselves stand out to a recruiter? How do they need to tweak that resume, or what steps can they take to make them a more viable candidate?
Sure. I think there's multiple, that's kind of a 2 to 3 prong approach. One, they need to understand how to sell themselves and talk about some of the skill sets that they gained in the military. One thing that I used to talk about to our senior leadership at Facebook is a lot of times you have vets, whether they're Army, Navy, Marine Corps, that served in leadership positions, right? Or 5, 10, 15 years, however long their career was. And they're working with cross-functional partners with multi-million dollars worth of equipment on a global scale. And they come to the civilian world and they're basically starting from scratch and working from the ground up. And maybe they only have 2, 3, 4 years of experience as a designer or an analyst or a PM or an engineer. So why are we not looking at these candidates with significant people management, project management, cross-functional partnerships experience in leadership positions in the corporate world? Because they have those skills, they're just not in the civilian world yet. So making sure the vets know those are things that they need to be able to talk about. I think the biggest thing, whether you're a veteran or civilian, is knowing how to get your foot in the door and not just relying on an application online. A lot of these big tech companies get thousands of applicants, and they get overlooked. It's tough to keep track. The job demand is very high. You could be qualified, but timing is everything. So by reaching out to recruiters, recruiting managers, recruiting directors on LinkedIn, saying greeting, connecting, greeting, saying who you are, saying what you're interested in, figuring out, hey, this might not be the right person. I understand that, but can you point me in the right direction? Little things like that, people take for granted, and they're still very effective. Attend as many events as you can. There's so many great recruiting events, whether it's a small trivia night to a 2,000 to 3,000 person recruiting conference in San Diego. A lot of these big tech companies partner with things like Hiring Our Heroes and Vets in Tech, and our SAC conference, which is a national conference. It's not ours. It's the Service Academy Career Convention. So a lot of large companies attend. But attending these events are getting you connected directly with not just the recruiters, but the hiring managers for global operations, analyst roles, designer roles, engineering roles, product manager roles, program manager roles. You're getting to the front of the line by attending these events. So if I'm making the transition from the military to the civilian world, I'm reaching out to recruiters. I'm reaching out to folks that have recently done what I'm about to do. I'm assigning myself a mentor, someone in the civilian world that is doing what I want to do, figuring out what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what tools or resources do they know about that I don't, and just trying to kind of be a sponge and absorb all those different bits of information and data and resources to kind of maximize and optimize the chances that you have of getting hired at that next civilian role.
Well, and you've obviously been with two of the biggest names in corporate America with Facebook and now Nike. How is that transition for you? Is that sort of the route you followed in terms of making those connections to be able to find
Yeah,
your way in the door?
it is. So like I said, I was lucky when I started that I had a friend in the career field and that kind of, taught me the ropes. And then I slowly worked my way up. And getting to Facebook, took a lot of interview prep. And then, knowing kind of how to navigate through that is kind of what helped me get to Nike by reaching out, not just applying online and expecting that it was going to work out because I had worked at Facebook. You have to reach out to the leadership and to the recruiters and get your name out there. And that's worked for me. Networking is a very successful tool that anybody can lean on. And especially in, career fields, things like design and engineering and HR and recruiting, your name is your brand. And so by attending these events and networking with people, connecting, having conversations, even if it's not immediate, if it's, a long-term relationship, they add up and they do pay off. Like, you may not be able to get a job today, but 6 months, 12 months, 2 years from now, you've developed sets at the smaller startup companies. You went to a coding academy, you finished your degree using the GI Bill, whatever route that veteran took. You got to think of it as a marathon. You can't just get out of the military and expect that director level position or to get a 6-figure salary, doing whatever it is you want to do. Does that happen? Sure. I'm sure it does. But for the most part,
Yeah.
you have to be willing to just restart that career. And I always say, like, you really have to be willing to swallow your pride and be a sponge. A lot of times people get out of the military and like I said, they've held leadership positions and high levels of responsibility for years and years, and you get used to that. So having to kind of adapt to that new civilian atmosphere and culture and mindset and how people collaborate as partners and interact with their supervisors is a lot different than you're used to in the military. So take everything with a grain of salt, and leave your egos at the door and you'll be successful.
And for you, what was the biggest surprise or adjustment you had to make when moving into the civilian workplace?
Geez, I think probably close to what I was just kind of mentioning is adapting to how people interacted in the workplace, and the different kind of op tempo. It's much different in the civilian workplace. So just understanding how peers work together. That a lot of times, even with supervisors in the civilian world, it can be much more of a partnership versus a top-down dictatorship. A lot of these companies work in a bottoms-up mentality, which is awesome. Everybody works to their strengths. They work together as a cohesive unit, and they come out on top. The military is very effective in what it does, but it is a very top-down structure. So, what your supervisor says goes. So that took getting used to, but anybody can do it. And there's pros and cons to each end of the spectrum.
Anything else you'd like to touch on that we haven't talked about?
No, I mean, I'm looking forward to leaning in here at Nike and getting involved with as many groups and programs and events that I can to bring more veterans to a great company like Nike, and whether it's in engineering or design or wherever I can help out, people connected and letting more people be as lucky as I am. I've been very fortunate in my career path, getting out of the military and getting to where I am today. I'm very thankful every day that I am where I am, and I want to see more veterans, have that type of experience.
Great. Well, thanks again. Good
Thank you
talking
so
with
much.
you. All right.
All right, bye-bye.